pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Thursday, September 28th. And Duane, I want to start the show slowly by just saying I'm dead tired. I'm training for a cycling event on Saturday for a great cause, for charity. So you can sponsor me and give us a little help. If you just go to my social media, you'll find a link for the Ride for Refuge where you can sponsor me. But Duane, my legs are done.
Your legs are done. You haven't been out as much this year. How far did you make it yesterday?
About 36K yesterday, which is my biggest ride of the year. Yes, it's nothing if you've been following me for a long time. I used to do a lot more, but that's before I had like a life surrounding everything else. So now it's difficult to take 4 or 5 hours out of a day and go do some cycling. But yesterday took time, and yeah, I'm paying for it this morning.
Yeah, it's those muscles, if you don't use them, it's not that you remember how to do everything else, but sometimes it sucks when you in the winter I was running like 7K, 8K, pretty reasonable a few times a week, and get stretched up to 10K once in a while. In the summer I kind of rolled that down, so now I go out for like a 3-4K run and I'm like, that's terrible. Yeah, no, I feel you. I'm not the biker, but I feel I'm gonna have to crank that back up for the winter and get back in the running shape for I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm training for some non-existent event at some point down the future, but nonetheless,
you're training for the end of the world, where you'll just be able to run for your life.
You know what? The way things are going right now, we might want it's survivor skills. I have a plan. If and when the nukes start flying, I'm gonna. There's canoes that are in the Humber River.
You prepper?
They're for rent. I'm going to steal a canoe and I'm going to canoe north.
So you're a doomsday prepper?
Yeah,
I had the same mentality where I was like, okay, 20 kilometers, I'm out of the city here. I got a cycling path that's straight out. I got my bike. Nobody's going to be on those things. I'm good.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, the canoe, water and rice. I'm gonna steal all the water and all the rice. I'm gonna hoard it.
Yeah.
He who controls the commodities will be king in the post-apocalyptic world.
True, but who's got guns will get the commodity in the water. So make sure you. Anyways, that's another topic for another day. Our Doomsday Prepper podcast. Speaking of Doomsday and hungover mornings, it's quite difficult this morning in Munich. Carlo Ancelotti has apparently resigned. Apparently has left his position as head coach of Bayern Munich following the 3-0 loss of Munich in the Champions League yesterday against PSG.
I was doing a little bit of reading just a few minutes ago, and the resigning is increasingly becoming pushed because there was a board meeting yesterday. So we'll have, tomato, though, really. He's no longer out. He might have done one of those,
mutually agreement to part ways?
Yes, it might have been one of those things. Or you can't fire me, I quit.
Yeah, what? I'm fired? Nah, I quit.
There you go. Either or, it's the same end result. Look, that result was startling yesterday, and there have been a lot of rumblings among Bayern Munich fans about the way that they play under Ancelotti, the style, style. Like Bayern is one of those clubs in the world that not only wants to win, they want to do it with in a certain way, a certain style, a certain pizzazz about it. Like they demand it, and that's what happens when you have a club that is so successful, so consistently for so long, especially in the league, that the fans don't just winning's not enough anymore. And he wasn't able to produce the type of football, Bayern football, and that's sort of a lot of the articles that are coming out right now. I'm a little short on detail because this isn't 100% official yet, and we haven't really heard.
It's breaking news almost. It's been just a few hours ago that the first article were starting to come out, and it's the aftermath of the decision basically now.
Yeah, and so there's not a ton of detail, but certainly it seems like what's going on, and the board meeting, what's being reported from this board meeting yesterday is that quote unquote, that wasn't a Bayern performance. That wasn't Bayern Munich that we saw against PSG yesterday. And, certainly not something. It was their biggest loss in the Champions League in any capacity for 21 years. So certainly when you're talking about that, that's not Byron at all there, and they're not exactly tearing it up in the league either. Now they're not out of it by any means. That's silly. This is not, like the early 2000s when Byron did have a true slump and were legitimately kind of equal with other teams in the league at that point. But nonetheless, they have looked a little out of sorts.
For years, we have known Bayern Munich to be the type of club that buys prospects that are breaking through, and after first and two seasons of breaking through for another German club, they usually buy them, right? And I think Bundesliga is in a bit of a slow, like a silent revolution right now, where young players decide to stay at their club, and they're having performances. We've seen the Dortmund, Leipzig really becoming bridging that gap slowly but surely. Like the 6 performance of Dortmund last weekend versus Mönchengladbach was quite a performance, and you've seen those performances rise in the Bundesliga. Am I saying that the gap is like domination of Munich is over? No, but I'm saying it's time now for Munich to probably move on from just getting a big name coach and getting just a team of best players and finding a way to play with them. I think it's time to go back to where Munich was before. You mentioned the slump in the 2000s. That's where it changed. That's where the money came after. And that's where they started to have that philosophy of buying everybody and just making an all-star team of German soccer, basically. And a few international here and there to make it all work together. I think it's time now to maybe develop your superstar still and maybe go get the pieces missing here and there. But back to development board, I imagine.
Yeah, and look, if you look at Bayern's actual academy, performances amongst their under-19s, their under-21s, those type of teams that are out there, they're not dominant in the same way that their senior team is. In fact, Dortmund is pretty much well known as the best producer of young talent in the Bundesliga. And God help Bayern Munich if BVB ever decide to truly get a little bit more financial might, which they have quite a bit already. But if they get a little bit more, able to not sort of sell those teams on or move away from the philosophy that has sort of existed within them for a while, to be willing to part with young talent once they are established for the benefit of the overall club. If they ever just hoard those or hold on to those players, hoard's a bad way to put it because they produce them, they deserve to keep them if they wish, then certainly Bayern is going to be challenged a lot more, and they need to step up their game on the development side by themselves. It is something that I think that's going to be key across leagues as clubs like PSG and maybe from here after we talk a little bit about who might replace Ancelotti, we obviously should talk about PSG a little bit too, but clubs like PSG that have so much financial might, like when we talk about MLS, we always talk about MLS 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and we sort of by now understand what we mean by that distinction. But it's almost like when you talk about moneyed clubs that we're entering either a 2.0 or a 3.0 era here, when there's levels of money now.
We don't talk about Chelsea as being a money club anymore, right? They're just one of the pack. We're talking about City, and even cities, like not on the cusp of a Madrid or a PSG. Like the amount of money they spent last offseason, and yes, there'll be ramification, and there's inquiries and already some police officers and some accountants looking at everything to make sure financial fair play will be respected. So there might be ramification down the road, but I'm saying the amount of money they spent last offseason, it's indecent. That's the only word I think of.
Yeah, no, precisely. Financial fair play is almost, maybe one day we'll do a show that is focused on FFP because there's a lot of problems with it, and that goes beyond my philosophical issues with how I believe it's set up to protect old money as opposed to really protect the glory of the game. But nonetheless, when you look at PSG, they're just flaunting them right now because they know that they're going to get away with it. And the idea is if you could, has always been if you spend this money, eventually you're going to make it. So at any rate, but we should maybe finish with a little talk about who might replace Ancelotti.
Remember
The
a few
one
weeks
interest.
ago? You
Sorry,
remember?
go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, remember a few weeks ago we're talking about this young manager from Offenheim, this whiz kid that 29, 30 years old. I think he's 30 now.
30, just turned 30.
He just turned 30. And how with a limited amount of experience, but philosophy and a different way to think about the game and a youthful energy that he's creating a different trend in Bundesliga. And, well, guess what? We talked about Bayern buying all the players. Seems they're moving to managers.
Yeah, look, if you look at the betting markets, which aren't necessarily a reflection of reality always, they're a reflection of what's going to move the most money. But nonetheless, Julian Nagelsmann, who's Hoffenheim's manager right now, as Kevin just said, is among the favorites to take over. Look, is Hoffenheim would demand and should demand compensation for that, and this gets into what we just said there, where Bayern just might just sweep in and buy them. He made comments a couple of weeks ago where he said, Bayern Munich is always in my dreams, which suggests to you that he is willing to go there. That's such a different philosophy. That's something that's difficult, as an aside, for North Americans to wrap their head around that aren't necessarily soccer fans, is how, player. Could you imagine an NHL player? Could you imagine, Carey Price coming out and going, the Habs are cool, but I've always wanted to play for the Colorado Avalanche. Which
Nobody ever said those terms, even before they were the Colorado Avalanche, especially. But that's a totally different story. You know what I equate it to? Formula One. All the other drivers and all the other team all have one dream, is to drive for Ferrari one day. In the Bundesliga, yeah, it's fun. You play for your club, for different clubs, but maybe one day you'll have the chance to put Munich's shirt on.
Yeah, and or how it seems like any player of Latin heritage wants to play for one of two clubs, right? And they're both in Spain. Well, one's in Catalonia, if you wish to get completely.
Yeah, let's not go there, but yes.
Exactly. We have a few more weeks on that anyway. But look, yeah, is he the right man for this job, or boy for this job, if you want to put it in perspective?
Oh, yes, he is. Is it now time? Do you need him to maybe construct his Zora more with Offenheim and actually maybe give him the chance to go to the end of his project with Offenheim? It's all good to qualify for Europe and be in the Europa League today for Offenheim playing Ludogorets later today. Canadian content, by the way, Ludogorets. Hopefully we'll play. But if you're looking at Offenheim and there hasn't been an achievement yet, right? He's on an amazing story, right? Let the chance for that first chapter of the story to end. Don't go get him before that, because then if I'm him, if it doesn't go well in Bayern, you turn around and you got no accomplishment on your resume at the end of the day because you left Offenheim before you were able to actually achieve something. Win a trophy, get a Champions League spot of a Europa League. Replicate the success of last year, and then maybe you'll have a better chance to go to Munich and have more success. And yes, move up, unfortunately. But you know what I mean, Duane? If you're Offenheim and you're Julian Nagelsmann, I would stay at Hoffenheim until I feel I've done all I could with that part of my career.
Yeah. Again, this is maybe the football manager player in my mind. Is you'd think you intellectually, philosophically would want to finish a project out, but Byron might throw more money at him. If this has truly been his ambition his whole career, he might look at it and go, well, if I don't jump at this now, you never know what happens. Maybe Hoffenheim crashes. Maybe suddenly I'm not the golden child in a couple years. Maybe whoever they bring in to replace Ancelotti is so massively successful that he stays for a decade. I guess if you put it into perspective of take football out of the equation, take sports out of the equation, and think about your dream job that you might have out there and whatever your field is, and if it comes up, you might love where you're working, but you quite rightly might look at it and go, well, look, I always wanted to do this, so why wouldn't I make the jump? So I guess you can kind of see it that way too, Kevin.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's take a break, Duane, and come back and talk about the rest of the Champions League that happened yesterday.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter @SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook Facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back, Duane, and a few interesting results. We've seen Azerbaijan score their first goal ever in the Champions League. Yes, it was a defeat, though, 2-1 in the first ever game in Azerbaijan in the Champions League. The game that caught my attention, and it was a bleep show, FC Basel Benfica. The red card for Benfica after was 3-0. Almeida got tackled on. He got up, no call, turned around, double slides tackle, cleat up on the FC Basel player. Of course, red card. It was already 3-0 at that point. And FC Basel from Switzerland making a statement game 5-0.
Yeah, certainly that surprised, well, my neighborhood's in mourning. I live around the corner from two Benfica bars around the corner from me. But at any rate, and not sporting, no, they are Benfica bars. Whenever Benfica plays, there are red Benfica strips everywhere. So they're all in mourning today. No surprising there. And the Portuguese league has been in the past one of those underrated leagues a little bit. Although Benfica's experience in Europe, obviously, they've had the famous curse. 50 odd years now, haven't been able to win a title in European football since that. Maybe 40 years, 50 years. It's hard to keep it straight after a while. I wasn't around.
A long time. Let's put it that way. It's been a long time.
Yeah, the other side of that is Basel, though, or Basel, as I believe they say.
FC Bâle in French. FC Bâle, yeah. FC Basel.
There you go. Is it French or is it German?
Basel is German, but there's the French equivalent of that name that exists, which is basically you take the S out and you put the L between the A and the E, so you got FC Bâle.
Anyhow, they have had really good results in the Champions League over the past 4 or 5 years. They haven't necessarily run it and had multiple results, consistent results, but they consistently get results that are good in each year, if that makes sense. Like, they're consistent in each year, you can almost guarantee that they're going to have one standout result.
Well, they draw Chelsea a few years ago when they came to Stamford Bridge. They beat United. They went to Stamford Bridge and got a result. And no, they have at least pretty decently in the group stage. Like, they were not an easy fixture for any team, basically.
Yeah, and the Swiss league, I believe, is one of those, like, amongst the second tier leagues. It clearly is a second tier, not a third tier. Certainly not a first tier, but it is a second tier league. And I think amongst it is probably, I would say, in a Champions League setting, I might put it as the most dangerous one out there if you look at the results. But that might just be that one club too. I don't know for sure, but certainly when I look across the board, they seem to be getting decent results in Europe consistently, as I said, even if it's inconsistent within each given year. So certainly yesterday would count as that decent result this year. Benfica, a storied, old, historic team that falls heavily 5-0 as well. Kevin, let's go back to PSG real quickly because we didn't really talk about them in the first segment. This is the question I asked you off air, and originally before the Ancelotti news broke overnight, basically, we were going to focus on PSG in the first segment today. That was at least we were talking about last night, and things change quickly when you do a daily show, but nonetheless, we should mention them real quickly. What does the fact that they won by 3 goals, forget Bayern losing by 3 goals, that PSG won by 3 goals, what does that say about their Champions League winning possibilities?
That they can score goals and they're dangerous. And if the defense continues to hold the way it has been holding, I don't think we'll see a problem. I think they should be a side that can rival with a Barcelona or a Madrid, especially the way they're playing now. If Cavani and Neymar can make amends and be able to be civil with each other and work together. We've seen Neymar giving very nice through balls to Cavani all night long, and that was showing me that, look, whatever happens, happens, and we're here. Like, in the heat of the moment, a lot of things can happen, but if they actually put their egos aside, which can be difficult in a locker room like this one, if the cliche that players put their ego aside and think about the club, the pieces that makes this club are actually tremendous. And where Dani Alves is, for me, one of the big acquisition as well of PSG 2 years ago that makes a big difference with a Neymar and a Cavani and Mbappe, and the way those players have linked up. Cavani, 6th straight Champions League game with a goal. Neymar creating goals, creating space. Mbappe dominating midfield. This PSG team can score on anyone.
Absolutely, and the squabble has taken most of people's attention over the past week between Cavani and Neymar, but and sort of talk about how there's a Brazilian clique in the dressing room and so on and so forth. But if you're winning 3-0 against Bayern Munich, I don't know how much those things matter. All right, the other result, well, obviously the two English results, Chelsea with the win over Atleti, which is a big result.
Massive. It's the first loss ever at the new stadium that I'm not even going to try to pronounce.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why anyways.
There you go. And that's the sponsor, actually, the first part of it. But at any rate, and Siska, Manchester United, I don't know what to say about that. Siska sometimes are terrible, sometimes are okay. They're mostly terrible right now in a Champions League context.
That image of the defender whiffing on that cross and Lukaku at the far post all alone for the tap-in sums up that game pretty much.
And another good Champions League week for the Manchester clubs, clearly, who are having a good season so far, both of them. I don't want to equate them together, as you well know, I don't. However, the other result that does jump out at me, and there is an interesting point here, is that Celtic, their 3-0 win. Brendan Rodgers essentially gave up on qualifying to the group and said that his entire focus now was to make sure that, quote unquote, they were playing in Europe in January or in February. So that has to be a really great result for Celtic fans if, in fact, they share that goal of playing in the Europa League. And you know what? Celtic should aspire to that because they're not going to win the Champions League anytime soon, right? So
but they can go on a run on the Europa League. Yeah, right.
They're in a weird place. They're in a sort of they're in a weird place. They're too good for the Scottish League. They're not good enough for Europe. So it must be really frustrating to be a Celtic fan right now because what are you really watching? It's like you're watching a series of friendlies each year that are intercepted by 3 or 4 games that matter. And one of those 3 or 4 games that does matter was yesterday, and they got a big result out of it. So
they're watching their bank account with a Dembele transfer. I know that too, and turned out pretty well for Celtic. Because what if he was Celtic and then injure himself like this, which probably takes out the opportunity of selling him the next transfer window because he's going to be on the meds.
There you go.
So they got lucky there. So Celtic is watching their bank account, and yes, we should eventually in the future maybe take a look at Brendan Rodgers and what he has done with Celtic, and even his record with Liverpool. That now, looking with hindsight, was maybe doing a better job than we analyzed at that moment.
Sure. All right. We've ignored it long enough, Kevin.
Yep.
We need to talk about the Montreal Impact. Should we play sad music or something? I don't know.
No, I don't have any sad music queued up. But last night the Montreal Impact at Stade Saputo 1-0 defeat against. What are they playing? I'm
NYCFC.
I'm blanking out. It's like a traumatic event last night.
Well, it was NYCFC because the one up note for the Impact fans out of this is that at least they didn't hand Toronto the shield with the loss.
Yes.
Because had they beat New York, and Atlanta would have had to lose too, but had those things happen, Toronto could have clinched the shield with, at a final whistle in Montreal, regardless of whether were they or not. So there is your half full look, Impact fans.
And I wish I would have had a foresight to cue it up, but playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? I just don't think we'll win a game.
Yeah, look, they need to win out, obviously. It's not something that seems likely. You were talking off air that really at this point in time, what's the layman's definition of insanity is to
expecting different results with doing the same output of effort, basically. So
yeah.
I would like why should we expect 3 wins when it wasn't the case before? Yes, you had like the season as a whole. If you take the 4 win out, like the 4 wins out and the 4 losses streak out, it's a win, a loss, a loss, a win, a win, a loss, a loss. It's like not sufficient enough. Like, the consistency hasn't been there, and that's what we're saying still. Like, oh, big win. Oh yeah, big win against the best team in the league. But then you turn around and lose to one of the worst in the league at home, and then you parlay this to go to Atlanta. Atlanta's a tough team to beat. I don't think they'll lose a game for the rest of the season. Probably the hottest team in the league. Well, not probably. They are the hottest team in the league right now. And then you find yourself against an NYCFC with the necessity of result, and the team comes out flat as a whole. Individual play at some point in that game, but that's how you sum up that game. The collective just wasn't there and wasn't good enough.
No, precisely. And, the TFC Atlanta game on the final game of the season is going to be a really intriguing game to see how both of those sides approach
rest
that
everyone.
one.
If I'm TFC, you rest everyone. Because what if you face them in the playoff? You want to keep some cards close to the chest.
Yeah, you can play from formation against them. It'd be interesting there. Looking, and yeah, from a pure TFC perspective, they didn't play last night, so I don't want to dwell on them. But from a pure TFC perspective, I think that is the one team that they may now be fearing a little bit heading into this, and that would be quite the story. It would sort of turn MLS on its head if an expansion team comes in and wins MLS Cup in its first year with foreign managers, foreign stars.
Foreign stars. Oh, Duane, I haven't heard anyone mention the term expansion team at Atlanta in a while. Why? Because it doesn't feel like an expansion team. It feels like an established. You've seen the stadium, you've seen the stands, you've seen the output of talent on the field. And yes, we used to talk, they don't have a soccer-specific stadium. It doesn't matter when this team is actually built for both. It kind of works.
Well, what's and MLS lifelong fans, and especially MLS people that believe very strongly in MLS's model and the value of parity and things like that, they probably hate Atlanta because what they're doing, and Toronto too, and NYCFC
and New
too,
York,
for that matter.
And New York, yes.
And even Chicago with what they did in the offseason to turn things around are
to a
showing
smaller scale,
that
but yeah,
money matters.
It's an arms race. That's what I said in my friend show the other night. We're seeing an arms race in the Eastern Conference of MLS right now.
Yeah, and it's we just mentioned three clubs there, and Chicago has underachieved for years because of the market they're in. They own that market. Chicago, you look at LA and there's what? Well, and also the size of those, the LA are the other side of this. LAFC coming in next year are also going to spend big. They're already showing that they're spending big on the management side. Bradley did not come cheap,
and
on
Velas,
the DP side.
Carlos Velas as well.
Yeah, so they're already proving that. So you're going to have the biggest markets in North America: LA, Chicago, New York, Toronto. Right there are the four biggest in the league. Right, they're going to be spending big. Atlanta, it's not one amongst the biggest in terms of population, but they have a very rich owner that's willing to spend on it. It's not so much the cream, but the rich cream. Cream is rich anyway, rising to the top.
So the heavy cream. So the heavy cream rises to the top in that instance.
And if you're a smaller market, you're going to have to spend in your own way, and you're going to have to spend smartly. Whether that means smart DP signings that you do research on, or whether it means a lot of spending on the academy side that you're then selling so you have more money to spend. You're going to have to do something creative to catch up, I think.
And it's unfortunate for Montreal Impact fans because the realization that, the window closed last year. That was the time when you could have done it with the type of team that Montreal is. In the future, it will be difficult without three DPs at a level higher than they have now, or three Piattis, or another player to the same status as a Piatti and Damali. Without that and more investment in the development side, in the office side, in the scouting department, and other professional soccer operations department, it will be difficult to stay in those top three, top four, and then it's a battle of 4 or 5 teams for 2 spots. I think this is going to be what we're up for in the next 2 to 3 years in Major League Soccer before there's another kind of silent revolution. But I think one took place last offseason.
Look, I'm just going to mention this today, and it's a talking point maybe for a deeper discussion in a while, is when Joey bought Bologna, I commented at the time that might be something for Impact fans to keep an eye on, to watch, to see whether that splits his resources too much, whether it splits his attention too much. And I think there might be something to that, because the other side of that, I think anyway, and I can't prove this in a real way, was the direct result of it, to my mind, was FC Montreal disappearing, which then takes away from some of that academy focus, again, in my opinion. This might be a talking point, these overall arching ideas of what Saputo is doing on an ownership level, besides writing letters promising things, whether or not there might be a lack of something there that needs to be discussed and might be a concern for Impact fans, might be out there. Just some things to think about, folks.
To be fair, Joey Saputo has been present for Montreal Impact. The fact that he's the president of the club and not just the owner, he has been present. I've seen him in most of the games this season, and he has been around the club as well. So yes, his time has been spent mostly with the Montreal Impact, and yes, it is shared with Bologna. And Bologna did rise in status in Serie A slowly but surely. And when you see games of Bologna, Marco Di Vaio's involvement, he's a technical director there, and you see Joey Saputo there whenever he's present. The business deal that he made for Bologna was a good one, and yes, it turned sour quick. If we go back to, there was a partnership between Joey Saputo and a lawyer from New York that his name escaped me, is Tomasino, something similar to that, so I apologize for not remembering the name off the top of my head, but Joey Toscapino, something similar to that. But the deal went awry, and Joey Saputo found himself with the entirety of Bologna FC, saved it from bankruptcy in a way, because it was looking for new owners and they couldn't find one in Italy. So for Italy team, like an entity, to be sold to outside investors, it's not something that happens a lot. And the fact that Joey Saputo has Italian ties, and the fact that he wanted to own the Serie A team, maybe that was the longest of his childhood dreams that he hadn't done yet. Those were all like perfect storm. Now Bologna is valued at more than it was when Saputo bought it, and that might be a good business deal that he made. And we'll see in the future how it all pans out. Is he going to be the owner of Bologna forever? I don't know. And for Montreal, exactly the same thing. Is he going to be the owner of the Montreal back forever? Nobody knows. But for now, if we're looking at on the pitch, Montreal, if they want to be with those top four teams, there's a lot of things to be done off the pitch. And if we're looking at the stands, yes, there's some sellout, and we have 20,000 people, 801 often at games, but it's still a fragile fan base where weather and bad performance, and look at last night, the weather mixed with bad performance mixed with some disapproval of a fan base, and you hear boos, and the seats are not filled.
Yeah, and we'll see what the ticket base is not what I think Joey would like it to be, and
it's around 8,500 last year, if I remember, or maybe a bit below 10.
Yeah, and it may slip a bit more too, as Impact fans might, just like we saw in Toronto when they went through their down period, or down decade, basically, a little short of a decade, but nonetheless. The season ticket numbers did slip further and further down, and you don't ever want to get in that situation. All right, we haven't talked about the Whitecaps, although to be honest, I think the Sounders are more who you want to talk about, based on a 3-0 result last night. But they sort of cooled off real quickly, and it illustrated what a lot of people have been saying, in my mind anyway, that as much as the Caps were doing well, and they were on top of the West and, on points per game. And in fact, up until last night, they were the only team in the West that still could technically win the Shield. It was highly unlikely that all these teams were going to lose out and they were going to win out. But nonetheless, they still had that chance until they dropped the 3-0. So what that means in a pragmatic term is that Chicago, Atlanta, or TFC win the East, and you would expect that those are the three massive favorites to do so. That will mean that the MLS Cup final will be held this year, as there is no West team that can surpass those three clubs now. Kevin, look, was that a marker for the Sounders? Are they the Western favorite now that they have done that, or is it just one more twist in the weird situation that has been the Western Conference this year that has lacked a truly dominant team?
Cascadia on top of the West, eh? You got Vancouver, Vancouver, Portland, Seattle all in 1 point difference. So 48 and 47 on the magic numbers for Seattle and Portland and Vancouver. It's so tight. It's for me. It's a battle like because of the demise of a Dallas and the demise of the Galaxy. There was like no prime team in the Western Conference. So the mid-table that usually is from third, fourth, fifth is now the top. And what I mean is just there's a bigger parity in the Western Conference, and it makes for great games. It makes for unknown expectations, unknown outcomes of games. It's always pleasant when you're going to watch a game and you don't know how it's going to end up. It's not fun when you're, example, DC United and you play against Toronto. Yeah, you're showing up. It's going to be difficult. DC United had one job last night and they couldn't get it done. So another thing on DC, but that's a totally different story. The Caps, for me, are a team that are, when they have everything going right, they can beat any given team in the league on any given game. The consistency, and it's sometimes trying to replicate how they win those games, that's what might be a bit difficult. Sometimes it's breaks, sometimes it's fluke play with the player finding himself in great position with the ball, and he finishes it, takes advantage of his opportunity. But those goals are hard to replicate mathematically when you extrapolate to different games. So do I see the Caps going all the way? I think it's going to be difficult, but on any given day, they can pull out a great performance.
We just talked a moment ago about the arms race, so to speak, and I put LAFC in that mix. I look ahead, and I know this is really talking about ahead when we're not even done 2017. I'm already looking into 2018. But when I look at 2018 and I look at the Western Conference, and obviously teams will make changes in the offseason, but nonetheless, the way it sets up right now, if I was a gambler, which I sometimes am, but if you're a gambler out there, you might want to put a bit of a future bet on LAFC winning the West or winning MLS Cup even next year, because if you win the West, that means you have a one-shot deal, and anything can happen in one game. Of doing that, because right now, again, no one seems to be stepping up, which again, if you bring in a big spending team and put them into the mix, and the Galaxy are another one that they may turn it around very quickly too if they are able to overhaul things in the offseason. You could see a vastly different Western Conference next year with this Cascadia teams dropping down and richer clubs stepping back up, filling that void right now, because that's the biggest difference between the West and the East is there's no dominant team. And I look at LAFC right now, and I look at what they're doing, and I look at that project, and I think that they have the potential to step up and do in Atlanta in 2018, because it just seems like after many, many years of the West being best in pretty much every sport, which is the oddest thing. But nonetheless, the West is not the best anymore.
It's not the oddest thing. If I'm a pro athlete and I got a chance to make money either in the cold northeast of the coast or to go to this West Coast and be like subjected to minimal degrees in the winter, yeah, I'm going West.
There's another side of that too. I think we talked about this a long time ago on one of our non-soccer shows, is why the Eastern teams, the Eastern teams are basically usually set in old moneyed towns, which means everything's a little more expensive. So the Western clubs in the nouveau towns, the cost of life is a little cheaper out there for the owners and for the teams. I mean, this is all in scale. So maybe they have a little bit more money to spend sometimes. Maybe they, as you say, there's weather factors that attracts team players there. But right now in MLS, that's not the case. They're going to the old, cold Eastern cities, and the MLS Cup by Parka, because unless Atlanta gets it done, and even Atlanta in December is not as hot as you'd think it would be.
But at least it's a stadium, so it's closed. So it's.
I bet you a lot of Southern-based American journalists that cover MLS Cup final and go to it every year are cheering hard for Atlanta right now amongst the contending teams. But nonetheless, a final thought on the day, Kevin, just a bit of a footnote here. I wanted to thank Martin Bailey, who's a stats guy. He's been sending me little stat tidbits all year. He's a TFC fan as well, so they're usually TFC related, but he sent me one today that does have relevance to everyone listening in Canada, and that is that TFC yesterday, with the Vancouver loss, has clinched the number 1 seed for the 2018 Voyageurs Cup, which means that FC Edmonton or Ottawa Fury,
perhaps,
I don't know, the Vaughan
Azuri?
someone like anyone, whoever wins League One this year.
KW United. No, come on.
No, it's okay. The PDL teams are not yet in the Voyageurs Cup, and they have an issue with that. But we'll leave that well enough alone for now.
Hamilton Wanderers. Oh yeah, not Hamilton. The Halifax Wanderers or the Hamilton Steelers. Oh yeah, wait, they're not there yet. It doesn't exist yet.
The PLSQ or League One winner, whoever that then goes on to play. I don't know how they're going to set it up, but nonetheless, TFC will not play an MLS team in the first round again, which means that TFC is likely going to be 2 games away from winning its 3rd straight Voyageurs Cup next year, and being back in that conversation again. Number 1 seed clinched last night with Vancouver's loss. If Toronto wins on Saturday, we'll preview that game on Friday, obviously. But if TFC wins on Saturday, they will forget math. We can throw math out the window because TFC will win the Supporters with one more win this year. So, Kevin, any final thoughts?
No, we're all good for the day. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Stay tuned to the Sports Podcasting Network for all the live shows we do and all the podcasts available everywhere on demand, anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.